I'm ready. All right, how many people do we have? We've got Lacey and Sierra and Caitlin, our rock stars over there. So we're probably going to have some more people come in. But I appreciate everybody being here today. I was on the phone yesterday with one of my agent friends in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was telling her I was teaching this class, and she was like, so in Alabama, we were required to do buyer agency, and consumer guide was called something else, but it was the consumer guide. We just had a different acronym for it. And so we were used to doing these buyer consultations and just walking through what it was to work as a buyer's agent. And it actually had the same kind of little section that had commission in it. So, we just would talk briefly about that, but not focus on it. And she was telling me that even the agents down there are really nervous, even though they're used to using these forms, that a lot of them didn't, because it was kind of like what we've heard, buyer's agency form is not going to stand up in court. I sat in on the class with Nathan Billings on Monday of this week. It was Monday or Tuesday, but it was Tuesday. And this form that we now have, that exclusive buyer agency agreement, will stand up in court, and it is clearly defined, and it is required by NAR. So, the main thing is we've just got to get more comfortable talking about what we do, how we do it, and how we get paid to do it. And I believe the more comfortable we are in doing it, then we can then, make our buyers comfortable in working with us. So whenever we can tell our value and explain our value in an explainable way, then I think that people are likely to do that. But I wanted to welcome you to my class. My goal is to make you more comfortable in talking to buyers about signing these required forms and discuss how we are compensated. I want you to become conversational in this process and make it as natural as all the other tasks that we do. Real estate's repetitive. Y'all know it's repetitive. So the more we do something, the better we get at doing it. So it's going to be the same thing with this. The more that you can reassure buyers that you are working for them and show them your value, the easier this will become, and you won't believe you ever had an issue doing these tasks. One of the first things I wanted to go over briefly with you all, and I'm going to share my screen. My screen is a mess, but I'm sure everybody else's looks very similar to mine. But I'm going to enlarge something because there were just a couple of things I wanted to go over. Y'all, NAR is a fabulous resource for us, and it is I know that they're getting bashed right now, and I know that there are posts that say we don't need NAR, we don't need an association, but we do, because it is what gives us power, and it gives us a voice, and they do a lot of good things, and I'm going to try to show you a couple of things that they do. But with Bluegrass Realtors, we do get emails regularly, and I know we all get inundated with email, but in that email, we can actually click and we can follow what's going on with this lawsuit, and they update it regularly. They add different explanations. I don't want to say daily, but regularly. So the biggest thing for us is what MLS policies have changed. And the biggest thing is that compensation will not be on the MLS. The MLS can have nothing to do with letting somebody know that there's compensation, cannot be connected with the MLS in any way. So it's going to change the way we find out how we can get paid. We have to also require compensation disclosures to sellers and prospective sellers and buyers so that everybody knows what's getting paid and to whom it's getting paid. But it is prohibiting the use of the MLS data or data feed, and the MLS cannot create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism. So it's going to be interesting. based on what Nathan said and what Christy has told us, it's going to require a phone call to the agent and finding out what it is for every home that we show. So that's why this is also important. The other one is number 54 that struck me. And it is what provisions must be included in the written buyer's agreement. And item number 3 is a term that prohibits the participant, who is us, we're the buyer's agent, from receiving compensation for brokerage services from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to in the agreement with the buyer. Nathan explained to us while we were sitting there, I mean, and there were 50 or 60 people in this class, that if we sign a buyer's agency agreement and we write in a 3% commission, and that's what we're going to collect, you know, however we're going to get it, but whether it's from the seller, from the buyer, or we're going to finance it. If a seller offers 3.5%, you find out in that phone call, then your conversation with your buyer is going to become, I'm going to show you this house. The seller is actually going to be paying more than our agreed upon amount. So I'm going to ask for you to sign another buyer's agency agreement for this new amount. And it would apply to only this one home. If you don't do that, and I know it sounds redundant and it's uncomfortable, but I think when we do it, the more comfortable we come. If you don't do it, you can't get that extra 0.5%. It stays in the seller's funds, and either the seller keeps it or the seller's agent keeps it. So just know it's like anything else we do. We just never want to leave money on the table, and you'd rather not leave money on the table that could be part of your pocket. So just wanted you to know that's how he explained it, that we cannot collect it higher unless we change that buyer agreement to cover that higher amount. So wanted to clarify that. The other one is number 60, and it is if an MLS participant hosts an open house, provides access to a property on behalf of the seller only to an unrepresented buyer, will they be required to enter into a written agreement with those buyers during the touring of the home? The answer is no. Remember, when we're in an open house or we get a sign call and they are unrepresented, you are working for the seller. So you do not have to have a buyer's agency agreement to show your seller's property. And if Rachel goes and shows one of my listings for me on a sign call, she does not have to do a buyer's agency agreement with those buyers because she is covered under our listing agreement, which is with RE/MAX Elite Realty. So wanted to clarify some of those because if y'all are like me, we have all these little questions that show up in our head. And hopefully over the next 6 to 8 weeks, these questions will be answered. The biggest thing that Nathan said is, and Christy has said, is we need to begin using these documents now. They are updating more documents for us so that everything's going to be consistent. And I wanted to throw out there, kudos to us as agents at RE/MAX Elite for using the new contract. Nathan said that of all the issues he has had since that one has been incorporated, his only issues have been with agents using the old contract form. There have been no issues with the new contract form other than questions for clarification. So just know that new contract is great. Get comfortable with it, use it. It explains everything. So use it. And I thought that was just an encouragement to all of us. So use it as much as possible. It is for the better of our clients, and we need to be using it. So I have a question. How many of you all have ever used a buyer's rep agreement over the years that you've been an agent? How many of y'all used them?
I've been using the one that we have.
Always do.
All right. So one of y'all?
Janet, I am too.
Thank you, Janet. Yeah. Few times. Yeah.
I use our existing one.
Yeah.
obviously, but that's it.
Yeah.
I have a question, and I think I already know the answer to it, but is
Yeah.
when you talked about redoing the form, if they're offering more so that you can take advantage of that, is it also totally reasonable and practical to, rather than make up a new form, negotiate that percentage off the purchase price or as closing costs or whatever for your client rather than capitalize on it?
Yes, yes. You can do any of those three things. The number one thing that Nathan pointed out, because there were lots of questions asked, the one thing he pointed out is that commission rates are always negotiable. And so, yes, you have the option. It's just like if I'm going to show somebody a property and the commission rate is lower than what we've agreed upon, or it's zero, then I have to have that conversation about this is what you're going to have to do. But your options still are, we either don't look at it because financially we can't do it, or number two, we will try to negotiate with the seller and see if they will cover it by increasing price or doing whatever. Or number three, I'll negotiate my commission and we'll just go from there. Because remember, in agency, we owe utmost to our client. So that means if I'm a fiduciary, I put my agenda aside because I am standing in person for my buyer client. So who am I looking out for? We all, some of us have children, some of us have parents. Who are you willing to stand in for? When you're a buyer's agent, you're standing in for that buyer. So it is always for their best interest. You are their advocate, you're their fiduciary. So if that means you've got to give a little bit on your commission, then you've got to do that. So we have that flexibility. But we all know what our threshold is. And so that's what you have to determine. And that's what you've got to work towards. So always remember in everything that we do, the commission is negotiable. So yes, Lacey, you can do whatever you want.
Thank you. Thank you.
How many of y'all have negotiated for sale by owner or contract? Yeah. Yeah. So think of that. Think about what we're doing right now as that. I mean, you've had to negotiate. Y'all, we finally negotiated. I had a seller that said, no, I'm not going to pay any commission, a buyer that was willing to pay my commission. But when we got down to the numbers, making it all work, and I did convince that seller, she said, if I can net this amount, I'll pay whatever you have to do, I'll do it. She ended up paying me 1%. And then my buyers ended up paying, I don't know, 1.8%. I did not get a full 3% commission, but I negotiated. I got everybody where they wanted to be, and I had happy people, and I did get a commission. So that should always be your goal. All right. So think about all of this as being that same way. Commission's negotiable. It is not fixed. And when we work on these scripts that I'm going to do with you, you're going to see that I use some language where I talk about it is common in our area for a seller to pay a commission or to pay my compensation. If we ever get into a situation that that's not going to happen, I will tell you before we even go into that home or before we schedule a tour so that you will always know what your financial commitment is and what it's going to look like. So I'm going to go through my slideshow real quickly. It's not very long. It's just got a few little things in it. And then I'm going to, let's see, let me get this out of here.
Tyanne, can I tell you a little scenario I just had?
Yeah.
I had a VA loan situation. And we came to an agreement. We made an offer. We gave him full offer, but we requested 4% for seller prepaids, up to 4. And that's $5,800 on $145,000. Well, they came back to us with a counter offer saying that if we would switch it to add the $5,800 on top of the asking price, they would still pay the $5,800 seller prepaids, closing, etc. But they didn't want to pay the commission on the extra 5,800.
Right, yes.
So that's what we agreed to, and we are
Yeah.
under contract.
Yeah, and which is perfectly fine. I mean, we used to do that a long time ago when we would write in for closing costs or add it into the purchase price, and we would say, because Mr. Seller didn't want to pay commission on somebody financing their closing costs. So it's perfectly acceptable to say commission will be paid at X purchase price. Yeah.
This was the only way the
Yeah.
seller would net enough to pay off her mortgage.
So y'all, let me run through this. I passed out my slideshow to everybody so they have it, but I'll run through this and write down your questions, and that way when we get to the end, you can ask me any questions or tell me any scenarios. And then I do have scripts, and I'm going to pass those out. I'm not going to go over every one of them, but I'm going to let everybody read through them. And then I thought we would break into groups and practice with one another. If you don't want to practice today, you don't have to. We have lunch coming at 11:45 from homes.com. And she's going to do a short presentation on what homes.com can do for us as agents for like advertising and everything, but and setting up a profile with that. But hopefully this will help you guys. And just remember, like my role and Christy, all of our role, Paul's role, Summer, all of us are to help y'all become better at what you do. And we want you to be comfortable doing this. The more we practice it, the better we'll become. You're not going to get it perfect. You're going to mess up, but that's okay because we're not perfect. One of the, y'all, let me throw this out there. There was a question. One of the brokers or one of the agents that was there kept asking, what if commission is negotiable and my seller agrees to pay 3%, and there's multiple offers, or I don't like the agent that's working with me, or I don't want to pay them 3% because I know they're not going to do the work that they're supposed to do. Can I pay them differently, or can I pay agents in my office more? So it was questions like that's where I get uncomfortable, because I always just think of, split it fairly, or if I feel like I am going to work more on one end of it, I might charge more. If I work for sale by owner, I want to maybe collect 3.5% because I'm working for two parties. So I am working harder. So I just thought her question was a little bit put off, because what if she's working with an agent that she doesn't know, that might be a great agent, but she doesn't know them? Is she going to discriminate against them because she doesn't know them? I mean, how is she going to be judge and jury of every transaction? So just know, y'all, just like in our industry, there are going to just be some difficult people, and just do the best you can working with them. And the more we show our value, the more the agents are going to want to pay our commission when they know that we're going to do a good job. Okay. But that just really made me uncomfortable when she started asking those questions. But I want you to know, yes, we can do that.
Would that kind of be like steering though, if we have multiple offers and we are pushing our sellers to accept
I mean,
one?
it makes
over
me
the
very,
other?
yeah, it makes me very uncomfortable. Her question was that it wasn't steering that way. It was more of can I choose one agent over another? Could I pay Mary 2.5%, because I really don't know what she's going to do to help me with this transaction. But, gosh, I really like Joseph, so I'm going to pay him the full 3% because I've worked with him before. Is that fair? And Nathan's response was, yes, that can happen. So yes, you can do that. Again, remember,
don't you
our
think,
work is negotiable. Yes.
Tyanne, don't you think that's a little short-sighted though? Because this is a long-term career, and if you screw over an agent, you're really not helping your relationship in the future with them.
Exactly.
So it's really it's short-sighted in my opinion, because
yes.
you're always building into relationships where in the
Yes.
future you're going to need a favor from that agent, and
Yes.
you're going to want favor with them and have a good relationship. And if you're thinking, I'll give this agent this agent that, I just feel like that's not a good perspective in my opinion.
Nathan said that day. He said, it depend, what are you, what is your goal in doing that? So yes, Caitlin, thank you for making that point because he did say that. So, y'all, when you go back to our pathways to professionalism and you go back to our code of ethics, the golden rule is the number one thing, is to treat others the way you would want to be treated. And that is in real estate, and that is the way that we should do our business. I know some agents are better than others, but we should always be professional and treat people respectfully and treat people the way we want to be treated. So.
We want to know who asked that question so we can always give them one.
Y'all, I didn't know her. I kept wanting to like take a picture and go, just who is this? Because a lot of the other brokers, agents in there were kind of snickering at her questions. But she just had she definitely had like an agenda. So it was just very interesting.
I have guesses.
So y'all, I don't know. I'm gonna have to find out who she was. I'll ask Katrina. She'll probably tell me. Okay, so our buyer scripts, let's see if I can, y'all, I'm just like, again, not the best at doing, I guess I just click. Here we go down here. Okay, so y'all, we've got changes in the industry. That's forcing us to rethink on how we can represent our buyers and how we can represent value. There's been a shift because how many of y'all said, if you work with me as a buyer's agent, it's free? I mean, we all have. I have said that nothing comes out of your pocket. So we've got to pull back on that a little bit and get comfortable now saying, which I used to do with my listings, this is what it would look like with a full commission. I'm going to share my commission with somebody because if they bring a qualified buyer, I'm more than willing to share my commission. So my pie now becomes half. And then I've got expenses. I'm marketing. I've got office expenses. I have my broker gets part of my commission. So my big pie all of a sudden comes down because I am self-employed. I work for myself. All these other costs come out. Whereas if you're an employee, all those costs are coming out of your paycheck as taxes and city taxes and all that. So it's having that kind of conversation, not only with our sellers, but also doing it with our buyers now, in that you start saying, I'm a full-time real estate agent. I do this 24/7. This is how I make money, just like you go to work every day. And then at the end of a week or at the end of 2 weeks, you get your paycheck. I don't get paid until closing comes around. And you're going to see that as I walk you through this process, the value I can bring to get you through this is then when I will get paid. And that payment may come in the form from a seller. It may come from you. It may be that we end up putting into the purchase price and the seller then agrees to pay for it. But we will negotiate it and we will figure it out. But for my services, this is how I make money, and we'll walk through it the rest of the way. So the role of a buyer's agent has not changed, right? It's just how we've just got to do a better job of demonstrating how we can help people minimize risk and help them become homeowners. Agents need to understand what consumers appreciate about having representation during the home buying process, and then be able to articulate that so that you can meet those needs. Now, when we go to these stats, which I had in one of my other classes, 89% of home buyers used an agent to purchase their home. That came from the 2023 home buyers and sellers report that NAR puts together every year. 89%, y'all. That should bring us comfort in knowing that 90% of the people used an agent. So I love that. That means people are not opposed to using agents. The other thing is, this came out of that same profile. 50% wanted help finding the right home. 12% wanted help with negotiating the terms of the contract. 11% wanted help with negotiating price. So those are the very things that we know how to do in the most efficient manner possible. You just talk to people that end up working with Zillow and they're frustrated after a week of trying to look at houses. This is what we do. We meet every one of those needs. And so I think that's important for us to know. We should take comfort in knowing that, and we should feel empowered really by it. Okay, so elevate your buyer counseling session, whether you can meet them in person here in the office, or one of my scripts suggests meeting them 15 minutes before you go look at a house. Hey, I've got a few documents I am required to go over with you if you don't mind. That way you'll understand exactly how this process works. And so, but at the beginning, pre-qualify them over the phone. Don't just go running, don't become, I'm just going to open doors and show you places. We've got to become much more proactive in how we meet with our clients and what we talk about. Pre-qualify them over the phone. Be transparent about compensation, so that when we do get to that buyer's agency, they will know. That's the biggest thing, is we've got to become comfortable saying these words. Create a comprehensive list of services. I misspelled it. I have something thumbtacked in the back, and it's like 100 things buyer's agents do. If you need something like that, do that. I also have like the home buying process and like a little Venn diagram, and people see that and they're like, oh, you're going to walk me right through this. So anything that can show what you do that brings you value. So find some resources and do that. I'm going to show y'all some resources at the end as well. So communicate your value, create a comprehensive list of what you do, treat buyer counseling with the same, can't read my words here, with the same importance as a listing presentation. Use the agreement as a conversational guide to your services, responsibilities, and compensation structure. I want y'all to think about that word. Use the agreement as a conversational, that should be conversational guide to your services, responsibilities, and compensation structure. So it doesn't have to be technical. It just has to be a conversation. Be transparent about compensation. That was the one thing that Nathan said. Compensation is going to be the big thing. Practice talking about how you are compensated and what that means for buyers. Prepare responses to common client questions about compensation and services. Practice overcoming objections. So all of those things are things that we deal with every day. It's not any different. It's just now we're going to be doing it from a buyer's side. So I've got these scripts, and I don't know if y'all want to just read over them. But I did these as, I just would take questions and then I would answer them the way I would do it. And so here's what I'm not a script writer. Like, this is not anything, over the top. That's not over the moon. It is conversational. Real estate business, as you all know, when you first get into it, you feel like, I'm clueless. I don't know what I'm doing. The more we do it, the more we're like, oh, now I know what I'm doing. Now I know what I'm doing. But every transaction is different. But our business becomes our business. So we all do it a little bit differently. I could sit with Meg when she's talking to some of her clients. She may say things completely differently than I do. So same thing with these scripts. This is the way I talk. This is what I say. Some of it I pulled from my accredited buyers scripts, and then some I got from NAR, but I would develop it into my own. But the main thing is your services. All right, so what do? I can help you find a lender. I can, help you figure out how to, improve your credit score. Hook you up with the right people. I can give you names of inspectors. I can give you names of structural people. I have a whole list of people that I can give you to. Services I can look at homes. I can preview homes. We can FaceTime homes, whatever. My responsibilities, y'all, that gets to our fiduciary. And in one of our questions on here, we need to know, I can't remember how many was in that meeting where Christy put an old car up on the screen and she said, does anybody know what this is? And old car is the acronym for our responsibilities as agents. So it's, if you've sat in all of your little risk management classes and do all these things, That is what basically the buyer's agency agreement talks about. Is if I'm your fiduciary, then I have responsibilities to you. It is obedience to do whatever it is that you want me to do. It is, what is my L, y'all? I'm tired. Loyalty. Yeah, I'm loyal to what you want. So whatever it is that you want me to do. So I'm obedient, I'm loyal. D is, disclosure. That would be, to me, that's a hard one, but it's like if you have a relationship or if you're going to benefit from something, then disclosure. And also like, just if you know something about something. And then C is confidentiality. So I'm going to keep all of their personal information or any information I'm not allowed to share is going to be confidential. And then A is accounting, which has to do with like not commissions, with security deposits, any monies that exchange hands. When I was in Alabama, we used it also. We were required to do net sheets for every transaction. So I try to make sure that people know exactly what's going to be coming out of their pocket. So for me, that's part of my accounting. And then R is we have to show reasonable care and skill for what we do. So those are our responsibilities. Now, that's to a client on my consumer guide. I can also work for a consumer and I just don't have the old car. I don't owe them confidentiality. So when you do go and show your own listing, then whatever they tell you is free game for you to share with your seller, okay? Because they have freely shared that with you. And that's why agency is so important, and it's so important for consumers to understand who they're talking to. Because if I've got my listing agent hat on and I'm talking to an unrepresented party, it's not that I could take advantage of them, but yes, I could take advantage of them because I could find out as much information as I wanted to. And then when they're ready to make an offer, I know a lot more than they probably should have shared,
Right.
right?
Do you handle, when you're in that situation, it's gonna come up more and more.
Yes.
Both sides. Do you handle, it's your listing, do you
Yeah.
handle the buyer then as a transactional? Like you make
What
it
an
kind
excellent-
transactional, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
the agent
so
rather than dual agency, because that dual agency is harder to work.
it's so hard. I give them options. I've done it both ways. I've done some dual agent and some transaction management or unrepresented, but I try to explain to them up front. I mean, and y'all, that's what's hard. I don't always do that, and we need to do that more. But when I show up, I might say, I did this in Alabama, I would say, hey, I'm here to show you this property. I just want you to know I'm here as the listing agent, so I represent the seller. So just heads up, if there's anything you don't want me to be able to project over to my seller, then you might want to be careful about what you share. Just leave it like that.
I used to, when Catherine lived, I used to refer her.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, or you can refer them out. Like I could say,
I asked,
yeah.
would you prefer your own agent?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's when I would say, you know, thank you for calling about my listing. I'm going to have Rachel meet you. She's an agent in my office, but that way there's no conflict of interest and Rachel can take really good care of you. So, yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So does that help you guys to understand kind of those conversational about, and that doesn't mean you've got to meet them at the door and go, oh, and like, here's a consumer guide. Even though by law, we are required to do that consumer guide.
I never do it to my right.
Sometimes I will, yeah, sometimes I will take, and that's what I want us to be in the habit of, is taking some of these with us so that you can say, look, I am required to do this. And I know we're just looking at this house and I represent the seller, but just so you understand what agency is, and I am here for my, you know, that's just, y'all, we've got to start doing it. We've got to start doing it. So it's not horrible, it's not awful, but it's just part of it. One of the things in my scripts, I tried to cover different questions, but at the very end, I put, let me walk you through each of these forms I am asking you to sign and explain them to you. So I did guide to agency relationships. This guide is simply a disclosure required by Kentucky real estate law in order that you understand agency relationships. When I work with buyers and sellers, I typically represent one party in a transaction. That would be working as a single agent. When I work as an agent for a client, then I become their fiduciary, meaning that I am their representative and have their best interest in mind for everything that I do. There are several agency relationships that you should be aware of. There's dual agency, which happens if I have you as a client, but also represent the other party in the transaction. It would require permission from both of you prior to us looking at that property. So you would know in advance if that type of agency relationship could exist. Another option is an unrepresented party, and this happens if we were to look at a home for sale by owner, or you could even say, or one of my own listings. The sellers would not have an agent and they would be unrepresented, and I would represent you, the buyer. Do you have any questions about this disclosure or agency relationships? So keep it, simple, whatever. Then the buyer representation agreement. This is a contract. So my first one is not a contract. It's just a disclosure. They don't want to sign it, but refuse to sign. This is a contract, and it is where you agree to exclusively use me as your buyer's representative in the purchase of a home based on the criteria you gave me and based on the qualification from your lender. It is required in order for us to tour homes. Remember that. It is required in order to tour a home. That means FaceTime. That means recording and then sending it later. It covers all of those. Nathan talked about that Monday or Tuesday. So if I'm going to FaceTime with a client, I have to have a buyer representative agreement signed. Send it in .loop, okay? It has a specified time frame, and it explains how I am compensated for my services. It is common in our area for the seller of a home that is listed for sale to pay a buyer's agent's compensation. If a seller is unwilling to pay the fee that we've agreed upon in this agreement, then you will know that before we even, I've got a typo, before we even go and look at that home, so that you will completely understand the financial implications. If a seller is willing to pay more than the fee we've agreed upon, then I will let you know that as well. We can discuss signing a new agreement for that particular property. If a seller is willing to pay less than our agreed compensation, then I will explain that to you prior to our visiting the home, and we will discuss those options. It's kind of repetitive there, so y'all, it was late when I was typing some of these. This agreement can be terminated with a 10-day written notice and includes a protection period unless you sign another agreement with another buyer's agent. So that was one of the things Nathan went over the other day. The current buyer's agent, neither do I. The current buyer's agency agreement has a termination in it. It's 10-day written. We still have that 10-day written termination. There is going to be a protection period, just like when we have a listing, we have that protection period. So let's say they don't find anything and maybe we lose contact with them, and next thing you know, they've made an offer on a house that you showed them with somebody else. Or anyway, because anyway. And then I'm like, if they went with somebody else, they're required to do a buyer's agency agreement. So if a buyer's agent, if they sign another buyer's agency agreement, your protection thing goes away. But if they go behind your back and maybe work with the seller by themselves, you are due a commission during that protection period. Okay. I think that's awkward. I think it's hard, but I just think it's something we're just gonna have to work with, and hopefully we won't see it happen, but we are humans and human nature tends to take over, and not everybody's honest and ethical. So how are we gonna see it? So just know. Nathan did clarify that he believes that I've sat on grievance committee, and y'all, every time there's been a grievance, it's been over procuring cause, which is who carried the part, who is the person that made the sale. And statistically, the girl that taught our class code of ethics recently, whenever she presents these cases, and it's always split, it's always like 50-50 as to who should have gotten the commission. So that tells us something. It is unclear sometimes. It often is hard to determine who did it belong to. We believe that these buyer representative agreements will help clarify that and do away with a little bit of that kind of stuff, because the better we get at explaining it, the better maybe we won't lose buyers. So the last one was agency consent agreement. The agency consent agreement is simply a form indicating your agreement for me to work as your buyer's agent. The remainder of the form will be signed as offers are made so that you will be made aware of the relationship between me and the other party, for example, the agent, the seller, or unrepresented. So it clarifies who the other agents are. Then the Kentucky Fair Housing brochure. when I sat in, or maybe it was Fairhaven, it could have been in leadership. The only response we should ever give for fair housing should be, as a real estate agent, I follow all state and federal guidelines for non-discrimination against any of the protected classes and provide equal opportunity to all people when buying, selling, or renting of property. And I ask that you follow the same guidelines. Okay, so your response should always be. I have said, yes, I am required, like if they say, could you show me the Italian part of town? I'm gonna say, I'm sorry, I have to follow all federal guidelines for protected classes, so,
You shared the brochure, you said that's great. Fine. I just shared.
yeah,
Yeah, me too. I
I don't talk about it.
you don't.
No,
I just say fair housing brochure, just know that,
FYI. we
because
know.
y'all, it's in every one of,
FYI.
it's
we
in
know.
every one of our contracts, like, we cannot discriminate against these federal protected classes, and so I don't go over all the classes,
Right.
but,
No, I just shared and say FYI.
FYI, you will be required to sign it. It's on our contract. It's on our buyer's agency rep now. It's on everything.